Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we'll be doing some experiments related to watercolor and texture. I've written down the experiments we'll be doing down here. So we will be adding salt, water, dish soap, plastic foil, tissue paper and bubbles. So today is all about creating texture. I will be working with two colors, phthalo blue and aqua green, as you can see here. We will mostly be using phthalo blue. If we want to use a background, I'll be using aqua green for that. To ensure the paper doesn't dry out too quickly, I'll be wetting the paper before adding the watercolor to it. So for the first experiment, we will be using salt. There's of course different types of salt and I didn't want to test all types. So I decided to test smaller and larger grains of salt to see how that will turn out. Here I am adding the grains of salt to the wettest area first. You can immediately see something is happening there. The salt seems to be pulling the water, so lighter areas are appearing. For the somewhat drier area, the effect seems less clear. Since it contains less water, this could be the cause of that. Next, we'll move on to the larger grains of salt. I do expect a different look since the grains will be bigger, but being able to compare it directly next to each other just seemed really nice. I love how you can again immediately see an effect occurring. I find it really satisfying to watch. Again, for the somewhat drier area, the effect appears less clear. Next, we'll test the addition of clean water and dish soap. I am adding the dish soap here. Dish soap can break the surface tension of water and it creates this interesting looking effect. Let's try clean water. Let's take a quick look here. You can see that some kind of drops formed and they have a bit of harsher edges. When we add clean water, we get this effect that is referred to as blooming. I also use this technique when painting galaxies to create some lighter areas. So for the next experiment, we will be testing plastic foil. Let me show you how I've seen people use this for creating texture in watercolor. As you can see here, the paper is wetted and then watercolor is applied. Then, when it's still wet, plastic foil is put over the paper and left to dry. It creates this really interesting texture that I've tried creating before without any success. So let's try this again. I thought it would be interesting to compare a different background color with no background. So we use aqua green for the background, as I explained in the beginning of this video. Since I'm a bit impatient, I didn't let the background dry completely. So the idea is to work as quickly as possible and then apply the foil, which I have here. I want to apply the foil to both at the same time if possible. Here I am applying phthalo blue over the aqua green and trying to ensure they don't dry out immediately. Then it's time to apply the foil. You can see that I'm struggling a little bit with applying the foil, but you can also already see what kind of effect it should give. And then we let it dry like this. So this is an overview of what we've done so far. I think it will look very interesting. Here I am painting the background for the tissue paper experiment with aqua green. While that one dries, I can continue with the bubble experiment, for which I had already painted the background. So the idea is that you blow bubbles with dish soap. Then apply the bubbles to the paper and then apply watercolor to the bubbles. Then the watercolor will travel through the structure of the bubbles towards the paper. Be careful not to pop the bubbles though. Also, I tried very hard to make this a very nice close-up with my macro lens, so I hope you can appreciate that. As you can see, the bubbles didn't last super long, so the watercolor didn't have that much time to get into the paper. Adding something to the bubble mixture that makes bubbles last longer could be helpful. Also, I tried adding more different kind of bubbles, if that makes sense, to try out different effects. So next up is the tissue paper experiment, where we will test no background versus a soft background. Here I have the tissue, which I will dab onto the paper to remove some of the watercolor I just applied. I did the same for the background experiment. Now we let everything dry and look at the results. After drying, there are still grains of salt here, so I'll remove those first. Alright, I removed the grains of salt, so let's see what we can see here. So here I tested the smaller grains of salt on the moist background and on the very wet background. We can see there is a greater effect when the background is still wet, so I would recommend to add the salt when your painting is still quite wet. As you can see, it can create this really nice texture. I think I could definitely try this in my Galaxy paintings. If you have any suggestions for using salt in your watercolor paintings, please let me know in the comments. We see the same for the larger grains of salt, where you can see more texture when the background is still quite wet, in contrast to the moist background. If I had to choose between either of these two, I would go for the smaller grains of salt, but of course it is up to you. Then here we can see the dish soap and the clean water. I already pointed out earlier in the video that the dish soap creates these kind of harsh edges, and clean water gives this blooming effects. They are not that clear right now, but I hope you can still see the effect. If I had to choose, I would go for the clean water. Then, if we look at the plastic foil, I was struggling a bit because the foil was sticking to my hands. I think I like the contrast with an already existing background more than this, but it can create really interesting shapes, as you can see. I would love to play with this more in my paintings. I would definitely recommend to give it a try. I think this could be really nice for the more abstract paintings. Then for the tissue paper, of course when there is already a background applied, the contrast is going to be less, as you can see here. I know people sometimes use this to make clouds, but if you have any other suggestions, please let me know in the comments. And finally, for the bubble experiment. It can create some really cool effects, as you can see here, but it also got a bit messy. So I think it would be really nice to add something to the bubbles that makes them last longer, so that it can actually create a really nice effect. I think I would definitely give this a try if I'm feeling a bit funky. I have tried a similar experiment in the past, as you can see here, which I also filmed, but the filming didn't go so well. So here I also tested salt. You can see these really interesting effects here again. I also tried sugar, which also gave some really interesting effects, as you can see here. However, I couldn't get all the sugar off and it became very sticky, so I wouldn't recommend that. Here we can see the nice blooming from the water, and the dish soap created again these harsh edges. I tried the plastic foil again, but it wasn't so clear here, and here as well. I tried tin foil as well, just for comparison, but it didn't work. I also tried the tissue paper again, so you can see this kind of cloud formation here. So I would definitely recommend to play with texture in your watercolor paintings. If there's anything specific you are going to try or you would like me to try, please let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time.